Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Well, it is fashionable these days to bash Islam. We will be concentrating, ladies and gentlemen, these days and weeks on Islam and 9/11. We've done many programs on 9/11, but apparently now it is what we want to concentrate on is what does Islam have to do with 9/11 and Muslims? Now we're forced to do this because it looks like our politicians have no scruples, of course, what is new. But now it doesn't matter what these congressmen and women want to be. It doesn't matter what they do to gain that seat in Washington. Even if it's to entice violence against Muslims, against American citizens in the United States. The latest craze, ladies and gentlemen, which has been, like I said, it's been a fashion lately to continue blaming Islam and accusing Islam and Muslims in general of being terrorists. The latest craze is from Michelle Elmer, a congressional candidate in North Carolina, who put an ad because she is desperate. We only have a month left for the election. This woman right there in front of you, she has done a whorish act by using Islam, Muslims, and the memory of those who perished on 9/11, trying to get that seat in Congress for North Carolina. Now, probably by now many of you have seen her commercial, but we decided to show you her commercial that she put on television, comparing Islam and Muslims to terrorism and the terrorists. Now, even though there is no investigation to actually prove that Muslims even did that horrific act on 9/11. And even if it is proven that they were and they planned it and they executed it, even though, remember, there is no investigation of 9/11 that had taken place. Everything you see in the news, everything you see on the ground, million Iraqis dead, hundreds of thousands of Afghanis, or probably in the millions, dead, all because of 9/11. Because the United States foreign policy has been driven by the events that took place on 9/11. The whole world had been affected by those events on 9/11. But yet, we find these congressional candidates who cannot win in the polls, cannot win on issues, they want to create issues. Doesn't matter what happens to American Muslims when they incite violence against them because of ads like this. Let's go ahead and play the ad, and when we come back, we're going to analyze the information that this woman had put in the ad. Go for it.
Back in the book segment tonight, did you see that? We begin this evening with a political ad put out by Republican Renee Elmers, who's running for Congress against Bob Etheridge in North Carolina. Roll the tape.
After the Muslims conquered Jerusalem and Cordoba and Constantinople, they built victory mosques. And now they want to build a mosque by ground zero. Where does Bob Etheridge stand? He won't say, won't speak out, won't take a stand.
The terrorists haven't won, and we should tell them in plain English, no, there will never be a mosque at ground zero.
All right, here to analyze Fox News' Juliet Petty. So, effective ad, do you think?
Possibly, but she's really not doing so well. Republicans seem to have kind of lost hope on her. But you know, when you are kind of back there in the weeds, you have to bring out all the stuff.
This is a lightning rod issue. Do we have polling on her? Is she down?
The polling that we have is from June, and basically it actually had her 39%. He was 38%. But according to Politico, she's facing, quote, lagging congressional campaign, quote, senior GOP campaign officials say the race has largely dropped off the radar.
Yeah, Etheridge is a guy they ambushed on the street. Remember that?
Yeah.
And he pushed the guy, or, you know.
He said, I'm sorry. Right, he apologized for that.
So, boy, you know, it seems that he would be vulnerable, but...
Well, here's the thing. He hasn't really come out and said anything on the mosque, and so the tactic here was go after a guy for not just saying something, but saying nothing.
I would go after, if I were her, I'd do it. I don't think I would tie in the mosque with the terrorists. That seems to be a pretty big leap, but I'd go after him saying, hey, what's the matter with you?
His people feel that she's desecrating this hallowed ground, obviously ground zero, by using this. He says, they say it's offensive. They say it's basically exploiting to raise her profile, which is, you know, arguable.
War on Christmas is only September, but...
Okay. If you were paying attention to what she said that Muslims, whenever they conquered new ground, they built victory mosques. And she mentioned when they conquered Jerusalem. Of course, she is counting on you not knowing facts of history and facts of exactly what happened. Because when the Muslims conquered Jerusalem, ladies and gentlemen, they did not build a victory mosque. As a matter of fact, the second Khalifa or Caliph, Umar ibn Khattab, who was the second man who became the leader of the Muslims after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, died, and was in Jerusalem, on that day, it was time for prayers. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre was right there. Muslims, his companions, the people around him, they suggested that let's go and pray at the church. He said no. You know why he said no? It's not because he does not want to pray at the church, because Muslims do consider churches as a place of worship, places to worship God. So apparently Muslims have been praying at churches because they consider them a house of worship. Otherwise, they would not have asked the leader of the Muslims at that time, Umar ibn Khattab, to actually go and pray there. He said no. He said he was afraid that if he goes and prays in that church, that the Muslims after him will convert it into a mosque and it would become a mosque. Instead, he went, and by the way, now if you do visit Jerusalem and if you go and visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, while you are standing in front of the church, just look ahead of you. You will see a mosque there. And that mosque named Masjid Omar, or the Mosque of Omar, named after the second Khalifa of the Muslims. Because he said, no, we're not going to pray here. We're going over here in front of the church, and they prayed. Now we learn two things from this. That number one, Muslims look at places of worship, such as churches, as places of God. That's why they asked him, let's go and pray at that church. Number two, they care about those churches because he was afraid that if he went and prayed at that church, that the Muslims will convert it into a church. And then she shows you in the ad a picture of the Dome of the Rock that was built like, I don't know, maybe 70 years after the fact. Don't quote me on that number. But it was built way after, and it was not no victory mosque. But she wants to get into that seat. Doesn't matter how she gets there, even if she has to step over Muslim bodies from North Carolina to Washington, she's willing to do it. That's the craziness about what happened on 9/11, because until now, the Muslims are still paying for what happened on that day on 9/11. How come Catholics are not paying for Timothy McVeigh, for the Oklahoma City bomber? He was Catholic. He was religious. And they said that him and Terry Nichol, because of their belief in God, that's why they did what they did. Is the Catholic religion a violence religion? Shall we say that all Catholics are terrorists? Because Timothy McVeigh was. What about Hitler? Shall we say that Catholics, he was a Catholic? Shall we say that because of his Catholic upbringing that he did what he did? Well, let's get into the Muslims and 9/11. Now, let me tell you before we go there. Number one, there's not a proof, not one shred of evidence that Muslims did 9/11. None. Even Thomas Keane and Lee Hamilton, the chairman of the 9/11 Commission report, said they do not have any evidence to accuse neither bin Laden nor Al-Qaeda. They don't have solid evidence. And they wrote that in a book afterwards. You're going to tell me, well, bin Laden was on TV and he claimed that they did it. I'm going to tell you that the only interview after 9/11 with bin Laden took place right after 9/11, and he denied Al-Qaeda having anything to do with it. That was the end and the last we've seen the real bin Laden. The interview that came up afterwards, even the head of the Pakistani intelligence services, which he was close to bin Laden, he'd seen bin Laden, he had many meetings with bin Laden. When the CIA got that interview with the fake bin Laden, who claims responsibility for 9/11, the chief of the Pakistani intelligence services said that was not bin Laden. And then from then until probably about what, a year ago or a couple of years back, when we stopped seeing bin Laden on Al Jazeera from all networks, fake bin Ladens, which many of Al Jazeera tapes have been proven to be fake tapes. Now, all this information, ladies and gentlemen, it's like, are we in deja vu? You know, this guy had talked about this many years. Why are we talking about it again? Well, ladies and gentlemen, our foreign policy is based on what happened on 9/11. You were okay with it, even though now you know the information you have that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. But yet, at the time when the United States went and attacked Iraq and killed 1 million Iraqis, you were okay with it because of what happened on 9/11. Because these are Muslims, let's kill them. Until now, our troops are killing people in Iraq and in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. No, don't tell me we left Iraq. We did not leave Iraq. We're still in Iraq. And not there yet. And that's not the end of it. We are in Yemen. We are in Somalia. We are in many countries. Are we going after Al-Qaeda? Can we get like one Al-Qaeda prisoner? Just one. You know, we're going to show, and then when we come back, we're going to analyze this more. I want you to understand, there's two things that we're going to accomplish tonight. Number one, there's a huge question about Muslims and 9/11. And don't forget that Muslims died on that day. I've counted about 23 of them, and we have a picture to show some of them, I think about 12 of them. Those people died in the towers. Those are Muslims, Muslim Americans. Muslims died on 9/11 too. Let's go ahead. We have a couple of videos that we put together to very much bring you back to, again, to 9/11, because the question that we want to answer, did Muslims commit the atrocities, or Muslims commit the atrocities on 9/11? And if they did, why are we punishing the whole religion? Why are we punishing all of the Muslims? So there's two questions. Number one, we don't even know if they did it. Now, what are you going to do if one day it's proven that, you know what, this whole thing about 9/11, it was a bunch of BS and Muslims did not do 9/11? What are you going to do? Are you going to bring back those million Iraqis? Or are you going to bring back all these hundreds of thousands of Afghanis and Pakistanis? You can't. And saying I'm sorry is not going to do it. You will be liable for this as a citizen of the United States because you allowed your name to be used by the government, by the media. As you know, the media and the governments are driven by powers that control these powers. You don't control government in the United States. Yeah, sure, you might go down to the polls and say, I want this and I want that, but those people that they bring to you to vote on, all of them have been approved by the system, and it doesn't matter who they get. It might matter to you who goes in there because of, you know, if you want a religious guy in there, or if you want a homosexual in there, or if you want whatever. They don't care about domestic issues. All they care about is foreign policies. Who are we going to use the United States to control? What people? Southeast Asia, in Europe, in the Middle East, in India, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Iran. That's what they care about. They don't care about what happens to your Social Security. They don't care about what happens to your health care. They don't care about what happens to your other domestic issues. And they will tell that to our congressmen. I've had many congressmen on the program who said that AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, will go in there and will tell you, look, we don't care how you do this, but we want you to do this when it comes to foreign policy and when it comes to Israel. Wake up. Wake up, because you're making the biggest mistake. The United States have made the biggest mistake any nation can do in history, in the history of all of humanity, that a whole people were hypnotized to go and kill others who did not do them any harm, except their enemy wants you to do this. Again, we're going to come out tonight from the program. Did Muslims really do 9/11? And if they did, is it okay? Is it okay to accuse the whole religion and all of Muslims? Two questions. Let's go.
But
I'm an architect of 20 years, a member of the American Institute of Architects, and have been studying steel-frame, fireproof buildings for about that long.
We ask that for clarification because as we get into this, we want people to make sure that you're not just somebody with a wacky idea.
Right.
Okay, you come with some science to you. What is the official reason for the collapse of the World Trade Center towers?
Well, we're told that the planes hit the buildings, and there was an explosion and a fire, and about an hour and a half later, in the case of the North Tower, the buildings collapsed due to structural weakening due to the fires. Mm-hmm. The problem is that we don't have large gradual deformations associated with collapses, and fires in high-rises have never brought down a steel frame high-rise building at all, ever. And what we have, unfortunately, is the evidence in the Twin Towers and the third skyscraper to collapse that day, which most people don't know anything about it. We have the evidence of the 10 key features of controlled demolition. In the case of Building 7, it collapses straight down into its own footprint at free fall speed in the first 100 feet. It's dropping, as you can see, symmetrically, smoothly, at free fall speed in the first 100 feet, 2.5 seconds. This is uncanny. There's 40,000 tons of structural steel designed to resist this collapse.
So what, a 47-story building?
Yeah, this is called Building 7, right? A football field away from the Twin Towers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, so what we're showing is left what happened. In fact, right is a controlled where you are using, or the people who made this happen, used demolition.
Indeed, and so this is a direct comparison. And you can see that, indeed, almost free fall speed, free fall acceleration through 40,000 tons of structural steel. That is uncanny. So we have 700 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation as a result of this evidence and the evidence in the World Trade Center that is very explosive. Almost every architect and engineer we show this information to agrees with us that these are controlled demolitions. If we can get them to look at the information, because obviously the implications of a controlled demolition are dark for our country, because that means somebody besides Al-Qaeda was involved, because these have to be easily 3 of the most highly secure buildings outside the Pentagon.
Now, if that was a controlled demolition, would there not be any evidence at the ground level of explosives within the building itself, that's the debris that's left?
Indeed, and what we find down there is pools of molten iron.
What does that mean?
Several tons. Exactly. What is that doing there? The first responders see it, the structural engineers see it. It's documented by FEMA, the melting of steel. Normal office fires is what's supposed to have brought these buildings down, along with jet plane impacts. But jet fuel and office fires don't produce molten iron or molten steel. It doesn't begin to melt until 3,000 degrees. But what we have is the fires only produce maybe 1,600 degrees. So what produced all that molten iron? Well, it has in it the chemical evidence of a special incendiary, which is thermite, a high-tech incendiary used to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. Indeed, in all of the dust throughout lower Manhattan, we have 4 to 6 inch thick layer of this dust, and throughout it we have evidence of tiny spheres, billions of them, several tons of previously molten iron. Well, how does that happen? If you have molten iron, the byproduct of thermite is molten iron, and it's dispersed throughout all of this dust.
Now, you were allowed to go in and get...
Mr. President, the whole world knows 9/11 was a lie. Your credibility is going to be destroyed if you keep saying that America was attacked by Muslims on 9/11.
So let me be clear. Al-Qaeda and its allies, the terrorists who planned and supported the 9/11 attacks, are in Pakistan and Afghanistan. I've already ordered the deployment of 17,000 troops. These soldiers and Marines will take the fight to the Taliban in the South and the East.
And you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to wonder exactly what President George W. Bush knew about the attack, and when he knew it. According to the official White House version, it was at this moment in a Florida classroom that Bush learned the second plane had hit the World Trade Center and that the U.S. was under attack. But here's what George Bush himself said almost 3 months later when asked about September 11th.
I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. The TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And I said it must have been a horrible accident. But I was whisked off there. I didn't have much time to think about it.
Now, wait a minute. George Bush was told about the second plane while he was inside the classroom. So you just heard him describe seeing the first plane crash on television that day. But that's impossible. No one saw the first plane crash on TV on September the 11th because the videotape of it didn't surface until the next day. So.
Okay, what data finally convinced you that 9/11 was not just by 19 hijackers? You know, the final convincing
was this molten metal that I learned about. And pretty quick, I'm learning about molten metal pools under both towers after they collapsed, and Building 7. Now, Building 7 wasn't even hit by a jet, you know, and yet it comes down, and then it's got this molten metal underneath. And where'd that come from? I mean, you know, I hear people say, well, that would be from the metal of the planes. Well, that might work for the towers, possibly, but it sure doesn't work for Building 7. You know, it's 300 plus feet away from the North Tower, and no plane hit it. So where does this molten metal come from?
This is how it's been since day one. Oh, it's unbelievable. And this is 6 weeks later, almost 6 weeks later. And as we get closer to the center, it gets hotter and hotter. It's probably 1,500 degrees. We got some small windows into what we thought was the core at some point, and it looked like an oven. You know, it was just roaring inside. And it's just a bright reddish orange color. See that stuff he's pulling out? What was that? We're gonna hold off on the water. See the stuff he's pulling out? Yeah. It's red hot. If we hit it too much steam, we won't be able to see what he's doing. Great.
I studied various aspects, and the molten metal is my first topic. It's the one that really caught my interest, and the data is just coming together. Now, I have a sample of this molten metal. Previously, it's molten metal here. Just a tiny sample. This is really all we need. I brought along with me at the last minute. I thought, well, I'll throw that in. And by analyzing this, we determined it is not molten aluminum from the plane. Okay. Indeed, it contains a great deal of iron, which is the product of the thermite reaction.
I can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something? You got to get back. I know that. All right. Get back. All right.
We've heard reports of secondary explosions after the aircraft impacted, whether in fact there wasn't something else at the base of the towers that in fact were the coup de grace to bring them to the ground.
When you're down there, Dan, you hear smaller secondary explosions going off every 15 or 20 minutes. And so it is an extremely dangerous place to be.
And I'm surrounded by firefighters who are just watching helplessly. They've had to suspend their rescue operation, and they're just watching a burning hulk of building right now. The front part of the World Trade Center has completely sheared off, as well as many of the upper floors. And every few minutes you'll hear like a small sort of a rumbling sound, almost like an explosion sound, and another chunk of it will come flying down into the street.
Rick Sanchez has been there throughout this morning for us. Rick, tell us where you are and what the latest is.
Well, I'm in that area, if you're familiar with this area, where West Broadway and Hudson come together right at Chambers. That would put us about a block and a half away from the site of where the explosion was. That area has just been evacuated because police have found what they describe as a suspicious device, and they fear that it might be something that could lead to another explosion. Obviously, there's a real sense of caution here on the part of police. I spoke with some police officials moments ago, Chris, and they told me that they have reason to believe that one of the explosions at the World Trade Center, aside from the ones that may have been caused by the impact of the plane with the building, may have been caused by a van that was parked in the building that may have had some type of explosive device in it. So their fear is that there may have been explosive device planted either in the building or in the adjacent area, and that's why they're being so cautious.
We heard another explosion, and I'm assuming that's the one that came from the lower level, since there were two, and I thought
because it was like 18 minutes apart.
Well, this is, you know, the first explosion, and there was a second explosion in the same building. There were two explosions.
Okay. Federal agencies that were down there do believe that there was some sort of explosive device somewhere else besides the planes hitting.
NBC's Pat Dawson is close to the scene at that attack. Pat?
Just moments ago, I spoke to the chief of safety for the New York City Fire Department. Chief Albert Turry, he received word of the possibility of a secondary device, that is another bomb going off. He tried to get his men out as quickly as he could, but he said that there was another explosion which took place. And then an hour after the first hit here, the first crash that took place, he said there was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. He thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building. The second device he speculates, was probably planted in the building.
First one and then the other, some say after secondary explosions.
We understand now there has been a secondary explosion on Tower 2.
If you wish to bring anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the other infrastructure of the building and bring it down.
Bomb in the building, start clearing out. Sorry, is there a bomb? What'd you say? Bomb in the building, start clearing out. Got it.
Idea of how much of the plane actually impacted the building.
You know, it might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual site of the building that's crashed in, and as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around, which would indicate that the entire plane crashed into the side of the Pentagon and then caused the side to collapse. Now, even though if you look at the pictures of the Pentagon, you see that the floors have all collapsed, that didn't happen immediately. It wasn't until almost about 45 minutes later that the structure was weakened enough that all of the floors collapsed.
Jeff, it's a United Airlines plane, it's believed to be at that site outside Pittsburgh, isn't it?
That's exactly right, John, with 45 people total on board. And one of the more profound things today, the imprint of terrorism seared not only on Wall Street, but also on Main Street. Here you have an area 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh, and this plane, which went down at about 10 o'clock this morning. We have rescue vehicles that came in earlier in the day, and they have turned up nothing. No one believed to be alive from this crash. Some of the media just getting back to the scene, which is about a quarter of a mile up on a hill back behind me, and so some of the first pictures just starting to come in within the last hour. I want to get quickly to Chris Kanicki. He's a photographer with the Pittsburgh affiliate of Fox affiliate. He was back there just a couple of minutes ago, and Chris, I've seen the pictures. It looks like there's nothing there except for a hole in the ground.
Basically, that's right. The only thing you could see from where we were was a big gouge in the earth and some broken trees. We could see some people walking around in the area, but from where we could see, there wasn't much left.
Any large pieces of debris at all?
No, there was nothing that you could distinguish that a plane had crashed there.
Smoke, fire?
Nothing. It was absolutely quiet. It was actually very quiet. Nothing going on down there, no smoke, no fire. Just a couple of people walking around. They look like part of the NTSB crew walking around looking at the pieces.
How big would you say that hole was?
From my estimates, I would guess it was probably about 20 to 15 feet long and probably about 10 feet long or 10 feet wide.
What could you see on the ground, if anything, other than dirt and ash? And
you couldn't see anything. You could just see dirt, ash, and people walking around, broken trees.
Okay. Well, we very much picked a sample. Now, there are hours and hours and hours of evidence about 9/11, evidence of 9/11 that the government story is bogus, to prove that it is bogus. But yet, the government has not offered not even one single evidence that, number one, it was Al-Qaeda who did it. Number two, there were Muslims on those planes. Number three, they acted by themselves. You know, the plane that supposedly went down in Pennsylvania, have you ever heard of a plane hitting ground and disappears? Now, I've heard that if it hits the ocean, but not if it hits solid ground. The only thing it made is a crater, and everything, the wings and everything and the people, everybody went down, and they never excavated. What happened to the people? I mean, did they go like to the center of the earth? You never asked those questions? You know, forget about all these questions. You know, if it makes sense. Now, these were experts, and by the way, there are hundreds, if not thousands and tens of thousands of educated people, experts, who don't believe in the story of 9/11 as told by the government, but yet we have the government of the United States saying this is the story of 9/11, and anyone doesn't believe in it is going to be in trouble. And you will see anyone who will not, just like the story of the Holocaust in Europe. If you question the Holocaust in Europe, you go to jail. It will come time when the people of the United States get closer to the truth. It will come time to enact a law in the United States that unless you believe the official story of 9/11, you will go to jail. You know, you have scientists, credible researchers who have done this. There is a movement out there, hundreds of thousands of people who don't believe in it. And let me tell you, you sitting right there in your homes, watching me right now, deep down inside, even though probably in public you might say, yeah, we believe that. But deep down inside, you're saying, you know what? We have enough evidence. At least, if you don't want to say that the government story is wrong and false, at least you're saying we need an investigation. And that's exactly what we need. We don't need tea. We don't need tea parties that are controlled by Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity. We need true truth movement. That's what we need. Because only the truth will set us free, not the Tea Party and not anything else, and not these politicians in Washington, not the president, not Obama, nobody. Only the truth. And only you can get to the truth if you continue with the truth movement. Don't let them lie to you about, oh, you believe in these conspiracies. Well, prove them. If Lee Hamilton and Thomas Keane, the two chairmen who actually put out the 9/11 Commission report, will tell you that our report was not complete. It was not based on evidence. You know, the United States government had Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who they say masterminded 9/11. They had him in custody for 3 years before they even sent him to, and we have a picture of him just in case if you guys forgot how Khalid Sheikh Mohammed looks like. For 3 years they had him in custody, and then they sent him down to Guantanamo Bay, and until now we have no clue, no idea what this guy had to say. We had other people that the CIA had, and they used enhanced interrogation, which is torture, and those people said they admitted to what they admitted to because they were tortured. You want to know something? Even the 9/11 Commission or commissioners, they said they did not have access to these witnesses. They did not have access to them talking. They did not have access to them being interrogated. They did not have access to them to ask them questions. They just relied on the story as was given by the CIA. What about bin Laden? If he did this, how come the FBI did not, they had him, he was wanted by the FBI on the Kenya bombing and something else, but not for 9/11? Why? Because they did not have enough evidence to actually go after bin Laden. That's why. You've seen some videos of bin Laden, they were fake videos. Where are these videos? And we have proven to you on this program at least one of those videos was fake. One of those videos was fake, and anyone, any amateur could tell that that video was fake, and they stopped giving us bin Laden. They stopped giving us the tapes of bin Laden. Now, probably what, a couple of months ago, they had a audio tape of bin Laden. The plane that hit the Pentagon, what happened to it? We've done many. We're not going to go into that. There are hundreds of questions about 9/11. Why can't we investigate 9/11? But we can go overseas and kill millions of Muslims. And now we have scrupulous congressmen and women using 9/11, using the memory of those who perished on 9/11 just to gain a seat in Washington and become one of those liars that actually lied to us about Iraq. They lied to us about 9/11. They lied to us about everything to do with foreign policies. Where are you from all this? Where are you from all this? Well, I'll tell you. Now, it is fashionable, like I stated earlier, to bash Muslims. And because of that, the media is an accomplice. How come the media is not covering those things? How come Sean Hannity and Glenn Beck, why they're not talking about issues like this? Why aren't they putting their foot down and putting fires to the government's feet and saying, prove it? Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because all of them are controlled by the same powers that planned the attack on 9/11. That's why. Because the media is an accomplice. The government is an accomplice. And as a Muslim, I take offense to that. As a Muslim, I am hurt and harmed by the lies of the media and the lies of the government. And I believe the only way to stop this madness and have the government and the media start telling the truth is if you bring them into a court of law and charge them with liability. Liability to all Muslims. Liability to the reputation of Islam itself. Just look at you. What do you think about Muslims? They're the terrorists. Just like that whorish congresswoman from North Carolina who will not stop at anything to get her way into Washington. Anything. And if she could have done that, she will do a hell of a lot more to get to Washington. Why? And you continue believing this stuff. You continue because if you would say, no, we don't believe this, the media will switch and turn. But as long as the media have consumers, have you for consumers, they will continue doing this. They will continue lying. I'll tell you where this thing is going unless we stop it. This thing is going to end up in the persecution of Muslims in the United States. Once it starts hitting the airwaves, once politicians, once the media start doing this, as if it was nothing to accuse Muslims of being terrorists, even though they have not proven that those who committed it were Muslims. Prove it. Even if it was. Why do you persecute all Muslims? Why do you persecute all Muslims for even, which it has not been proven anywhere, that actually those 19 Muslims did it? We have many stories, and even one of them, just bring the government to answer to one, just one. Building 7. What took place there? Building 7. What happened there? Why did Building 7 fall? If experts tell us it's impossible unless somebody had placed explosives. And we have many witnesses who said explosives went off in those buildings. Many witnesses to say that. Now, can the President of the United States answer why does he think that's a conspiracy theory? Yes, there was a conspiracy. That's what happens in a crime. It's got to be a conspiracy. And it's not a theory. It's a fact. It's not a theory, it's a fact. Conspiracy is when two or more people conspire to do something. And I think what happened on 9/11 took a lot of people to conspire. So yes. Okay? If you don't believe in these conspiracy theories, and they will tell you right away when you talk to people, oh, you one of those conspiracy theorists? No, I'm not. Just answer me, how did Building 7 fall? Forget about everything else. There are hundreds of thousands of questions, ladies and gentlemen. Forget about where did the plane go in Pennsylvania. Forget about, the Pentagon. It's one of the most secured place in the world. They got hundreds of cameras around. They cannot provide not even one single camera to show what happened. Not even one. Yeah, after I think like 3 years or so, the government showed us like one out of, they said it was a gas station, and you can see nothing but a streak. You can't even see a plane. You just see a streak of lightning, fire. That's all you see. That's it. Colin Powell, a week after 9/11, he did say that we are going to, poor Colin Powell. Colin Powell probably, he was used. He was the only one outside of the pack. Because all the neocons, the Zionists who were around George Bush, all of them, Rumsfeld and Cheney and Douglas Feith and Paul Wolfowitz and Richard Pearl, all of them Zionist neocons, except him. He said, oh, we have strong evidence to show and to prove that Al-Qaeda did it. The next day after he said that in a press conference with President Bush, he said, oh, those documents that I talked about, they were classified. A document to prove that Al-Qaeda did it, why would it be classified? Why would it be classified? Didn't you want, if you have a document to prove Al-Qaeda did it, that would be the first thing the government would put, so at least it would have a leg to stand on to go to war against Muslims. To be classified, and until now, 9 years later, it's not there. Well, we're going to be talking about the responsibility and the liability of Muslims in 9/11. Because, in my opinion, they got none. They had nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. Now, sure, I might even give you the story that 19 of those Arabs were on those planes. You know something? I'll give you that. But who planned it and who put the explosives in the building? And then the other questions. They can't fly those planes the way they flew them. Unless a computer is actually in command and in control of those planes. One of those guys who flew that could not even, he can take off but he can't land. I don't want to go, we went through all this in previous shows. We've talked about 9/11. We started talking about 9/11 since 9/11, and we kind of stopped talking about it because it was a boring subject to talk about. But the fact remains that 9/11 still the catalyst to why the United States went to war in the Middle East and in Afghanistan and in Pakistan and now in Somalia and Yemen. 9/11 will remain, but now there is a new problem for Muslims in the United States of this bash the Muslim, which will give ideas into hate the Muslims. And then it turns into persecute the Muslims. Just like what happened to Jews in Europe. Just like what happened to Catholics. Just like what happened to Protestants. Just like what happens to any religion of the minority, when the religion of the majority, or those who claim to be of a different religion, but they happen to be the majority, that's when persecution takes place. We don't want to see that. You don't want to see that more than I don't want to see that. But we cannot do anything about it. People will continue doing this. Congresswomen and congressmen, by the way, there was another idiot there in North Carolina who's very much of that view, and he is running for Congress too. Forgot his name. Using the same tactics. These people are using these tactics so they can get to Washington, regardless if it takes hundreds of thousands of Muslims in the United States years down the road when everybody hates them. If it takes to wipe these people off the face of the earth, a Holocaust, a real one this time, they're not going to stop because they're selfish people. And they will say anything to be elected. All I can tell you is, ask for investigations of 9/11. I asked my congressman, Charles Bustani, and he said it was investigated. He sent me a letter saying there was an investigation, and they concluded that Al-Qaeda was the one who did it, even though those people who concluded that they don't believe in their own report. But yet, my congressman believed in that report. I think you need to call the congressman and call the senator and say, we need an investigation of 9/11. He's going to say no. But if there's enough of you out there who will do this, we will force an investigation of 9/11. Get America back. You want to restore honor? Glenn Beck wants to restore honor. Restoring honor can only happen if we are truthful with the world. The whole world knows the truth, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. You're the only one left on the face of the earth here in the United States who don't believe in the real story of 9/11. The whole world knows that Al-Qaeda could not have accomplished 9/11. The whole world knows that there is a United States conspiracy that includes elements in the United States and outside that conspired to do what happened on 9/11 that day. You're the only one that is left out there in the dark, because the Iron Curtain, ladies and gentlemen, that was installed on Russia after the destruction of the Soviet Union, we brought that Iron Curtain to our shores, and now we are shielded by the wall from the outside world. Now we are given, don't think you have freedom of the press on mass basis. Yes, you have freedom of the press on stations like this, but we're not reaching the 12 million and the 14 million and the 20 millions. And until the media starts covering this story, the mass media start covering it, and until you get out there and you do your job, nothing is going to happen, and this world is going to continue down this dark alley that it's going into. When you get there to the end, it's too late. You will not find your way back. It's too late for you. Well, this is not really something, if you watch this program and you've been watching this program for a while, we kind of got away from 9/11, but it looks like I'm being forced by ads like this to get back and continue on this 9/11 from one view and one point of view. Did Muslims do 9/11? Because I believe they did not. And if they did, why are we persecuting the whole religion? Why are we persecuting all of Muslims. That's what we will be doing, and that's what we will be concentrating on from now on until the truth be told, and until you come on board and asking, call your congressmen, call your senators, tell them enough is enough, investigate 9/11. Well, that's all, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we have for tonight, and we will see you next week. Same time, same place. Get to the truth. That's all I can tell you. And like we always say, go do the right thing. Good night. See you next week. Ustream.